don't think it's a crazy statement to say that the WWE is undoubtedly very good and also very efficient at finding and nurturing talent from all over the world and turning them into the next giant megastar. They've been doing it for the better part of 50 years, so it's not a shock that they're good at it. They have an army of recruits scouring the indies, checking out college talent to bring them into the performance center, mold them into their WWE vision, turn them loose and make them into your next Braun Breaker, your next John Cena, your next Cody Rhodes, your next Roman Reigns. But as good as the WWE is at finding and nurturing talent, somehow, shockingly, they're also very good at not recognizing when they have amazing talent already in their grasps. I can't tell you how many times, especially during the Vince McMahon era, that the WWE has had somebody that everyone collectively knows could be a main event player, could be an awesome asset to the WWE, only for the WWE to not use them and just waste them away and lose them entirely. So in today's video, we're gonna look at a few of those curious modern day cases of the WWE completely fumbling WWE superstars. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I'm confident that you're gonna fall in love with this YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, let's jump into it. Look, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel on this one. Let's start with the most obvious one that we need to be talking about because it's the one that is in the top of everyone's mind. That is Dijak, who the WWE chose to not re-sign. And I've been very vocal about this. I genuinely believe that Dijak may be one of the top 5 best professional wrestlers on the planet today. His in-ring performance is always out of this world. This man has been putting on 5-star matches for as long as I can remember, as far back as like 2016 in the indies. Every time this guy is allowed to perform in the ring, it is match of the night, match of the week, match of the month, and this year he already has, to me, the match of the year. This guy is a bona fide stud in the ring, and I do not understand how the WWE continued time after time to completely misuse him. They misused him as he got called up from being dominant Dijakovic in NXT, where again was having banger after banger with everyone on that roster, got called up to Raw during the pandemic to be part of Retribution, and they basically did the Deadpool treatment on him where they completely ripped away everything that made him good and turned him into T-Bar, made him wear a mask and limited what he could do. He was completely neutered. He was a neutered version of himself. Then he goes back down to NXT. Once again, reminds everyone how motherfucking good he is. And then he gets called up to Raw and they have nothing for him. They put him in WWE Speed and then they don't re-sign him. I do not understand this. This man is far too good to just let walk out. He didn't even ask for a release. This is a guy that wants to work for the WWE. He's made that clear. He would have re-signed if the contract made sense, but there was nothing presented to him. I don't get it. This one absolutely blows my mind. And what's crazy about this is that there was no reason for him to even be called up to Raw in the first place. Right now, NXT is struggling in their men's main event scene because everyone from the men's main event scene got called up to Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown, leaving Trick Williams with almost nobody to feud with in that first month of him being a champion. It should have been Dijak. You had Dijak right there to fill the power vacuum left in the men's main event scene in NXT. Instead, you called him up with no plans for him, and then you let him walk. You let him walk. You let one of the best in-ring performers that you have walk. I do not get this. This one makes me so sad. Dude, I'm so bummed about this one, like genuinely really bummed about this. He's gonna land wherever the hell that he wants. Anyone with a set of eyeballs knows what they're gonna be getting with Dijak. They're going to be getting a guy that you can instantly insert into your main event scene, whether it's TNA, AEW. He could run through the indies and be a megastar there. He could go to New Japan and be the top guy in there. He could just be so good wherever it is that he wants to go. It's a shame. I'm bummed about this one, like genuinely upset. Do you remember this guy? If you're a modern wrestling fan, you might not, but this is Alex Riley. And to some people, you might think, well, I remember Alex Riley being this jobber in like 2014, 2015, and you're right. But there was a period of time, the tiniest of windows where the WWE could have actually made Alex Riley into their biggest babyface alongside John Cena. It sounds crazy. You had to be there to understand what I'm talking about. In 2011 and in 2010, he was the Miz's stooge. He was the guy carrying around the briefcase for the Miz. He was the one that was basically being abused by the Miz. Anytime that the Miz got an opportunity to blame somebody, he would blame Alex Riley. And Alex Riley had the babyface turn heard around the world. The pop was huge. The momentum that this guy was huge. Everyone wanted to see him beat up the biggest heel in the business at the time, The Miz. They had it right there. They had the fireworks. They just needed to light it and let it blow up, but instead they let it fizzle out. They did nothing with him, and then just like that, he was gone. It was an opportunity, a fleeting opportunity that was right there for the WWE that either they didn't want to take advantage of or they didn't recognize. But people watching at home, the people that remember this era of Alex Riley, remember that the WWE had a 30-day period where they could have turned this guy into an uber megastar. This one might seem a little bit crazy, and to some might even be a stretch, and I think that's fair because Christian had a Hall of Fame worthy career in the WWE. To be fair, it was a Hall of Fame worthy career as a tag team member, and they tried a couple of times with him as a single star, but it seems like the WWE, for one reason or another, and it sounds like from the many stories that it was Vince McMahon just not liking Christian's face, thinking that his face was stupid. For these reasons, he never really got a chance to flourish as a single star. And what's crazy is that when he would get a chance as a single star in the WWE, it wouldn't work. Christian would leave. He went to TNA. You know what he did in TNA as Christian Cage in the mid-2000s, late 2000s? He became their top guy, their champion, and he was recognized by many as like one of the top single stars in all of professional wrestling. So then the WWE brings him back, lets him try a singles run, and they do nothing with him. They throw him in ECW, the shitty ECW, to be their ECW world champion. And when he came back, you know what the reaction was from the commentators? You know what the reaction should have been? Oh my God, that's Christian! That's Christian! By God, that's Christian! Instead, the reaction, and I'm not kidding you, go watch the YouTube video, was, it's Christian. And we know the story of his injuries, and then he has that huge pop in the Royal Rumble where he came to help Edge win. He started wearing the turtleneck, feuded with Randy Orton, and the WWE seemed to have no interest in signing him, no interest in letting him be this new version of himself in modern day WWE. And guess what happens? Exactly what happened in 2006. He goes to AEW, and la-di-da, what do you know? He becomes one of their top guys. He becomes the best heel in all of professional wrestling as the leader of the patriarchy. This is a guy that it seems like everyone knew how to use except the WWE. To me, that's not a Christian problem. That's a WWE problem, clearly. Most of you that didn't watch NXT never got a chance to truly see what Cameron Grimes was capable of. He was called up to the main roster. He had a 2-week feud with Baron Corbin where he squashed Baron Corbin in 6 seconds, which I still think is a mistake. And then we never really saw him again outside of getting speared by Braun Breaker every now and then and having the occasional squash match, because then he got released from the WWE, and that was his entire year in the main roster, where I think he maybe made a handful of appearances in total, maybe like 6 that I can count off the top of my head, which is insane because in NXT, he was one of the blossoming superstars over there. He was a North American champion. He was consistently a great in-ring performer. He was a chameleon when it came to changing his character whenever he needed to make it land and stick with the audience. And in WWE, it's not that he fumbled. It's not that he face planted. It's that he literally never got an opportunity. And I feel like there's so many cases like this of guys that in NXT are great. They are showcased and they get an opportunity to try and win over the crowd, both in the arena and at home, and they succeed. And then they get to the main roster and then don't get those same opportunities. And then they just disappear. And that was the curious case of Cameron Grimes. It sucks because the people that know, the people that watched NXT, either late Black and Gold or NXT 2.0, know that he's very good. And we never got to see that on the main roster. Never once.
Goodness.
Dude, that's, oh my.
Jeez.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, buckle bomb into the spear. Beautiful. That was a sneak peek of this week's Wrestling is Cool Match Club, which is available exclusively on Patreon. This week, we'll be looking at Matt Hardy versus Bray Wyatt in the Ultimate Deletion, the famous TNA cage match between Triple X and America's Most Wanted, a Lucha Classic between Prince Puma and Pentagon Jr. in Lucha Underground, The Shield versus the Usos at Money in the Bank 2013, and the infamous 2020 men's and women's Money in the Bank ladder match where they had to climb up the Titan Towers during the pandemic. Again, our watch-alongs are available exclusively on Patreon, as I cannot show them here on YouTube. It's impossible. But over on Patreon, not only do you get the Wrestling is Cool Match Clubs, which is 5 per week, but you also get the Monday Night Raw reviews, the SmackDown reviews, and the Wrestling is Cool podcast 3 days earlier than everyone else. So come check it out. I'm confident that you're going to fall in love with it, even if you just give it a chance for 1 month. But that's it. Let's get back to the video. The case of Keith Lee is a really frustrating one, because this is like peak prime Vince McMahon completely losing his marbles and making terrible decisions. Hey, let's take this guy who was the most over-popular guy in NXT at the time, and let's completely change his attire, and let's change his name, and let's add a little R to him and make him the Bearcat for some reason. This is where I genuinely believe that Vince McMahon started to lose his marbles, and it couldn't have been a worse time period, because Keith Lee isn't the only casualty of this like Vince McMahon losing his marbles era in the late 2010s and in the early pandemic era, but Keith Lee is definitely one of the more prominent ones that was a major casualty of these god-awful decisions from writing and from Vince McMahon. Unfortunately, Keith Lee did have some health problems that forced him off of television, and obviously that doesn't help his case, but it is what it is. Like that, those things happen, but he never really got the opportunity to be able to even try and regain that momentum after coming back from his health scare, which is just such a shame. But I don't think that he ever would have gotten a proper opportunity even without the health scare, because we saw what was happening with him as Bearcat Keith Lee. Like, he was quickly on a trajectory down under the booking of Vince McMahon, a trajectory so far down that it caused him to land over in AEW, where frankly they're also not using him very well. So I do hope that maybe we live in a reality where Keith Lee's AEW contract runs out and maybe he actually gets an opportunity to be booked great under Triple H, just like he was in NXT Black and Gold. Aleister Black is almost the exact carbon copy of everything that I just said about Keith Lee. It's insanity that this guy never really got a chance to get off the ground running in the main roster. It's actually ludicrous. And what's insane is that they were about to try a new kind of like cult leader, Far Cry 5-ish character with him, almost kind of like what they did with Joe Gacy in NXT. It's almost like they took the gimmick that they were going to give him and gave it to Joe Gacy, a gimmick which worked for Joe Gacy, by the way. And in the middle of him doing all of these video packages and vignettes and the hype packages that we were all waiting for him to come on screen, and he just got released. Just like that, gone, poof, disappeared, and then he lands in AEW in 30 days because they didn't even realize that he only had a 30-day non-compete clause, which just kind of goes to show that they weren't paying any attention to this guy in any capacity whatsoever, that they allow his no-compete clause to be only 30 days. But Aleister Black is, again, another one of those insanely bizarre casualties from NXT Black and Gold. There are so many cases like this. Again, super popular, top guy in NXT. The second Vince McMahon gets a whiff of this guy, instantly just buried and not allowed to do the thing that he is good at. It's such a shame. This is why this era of professional wrestling, you don't understand how much I value it and cherish it, because people are being, for the most part at least, given an opportunity to actually sink or swim. Aleister Black never got a chance to swim. They just immediately shackled him up with 10 tons of weight and put him into the ocean to sink. Next up, we have the Fiend Bray Wyatt, and I do mean specifically the Fiend. This is the character that the WWE pretty much did everything imaginable to ruin. The Fiend was on the cusp of being the next great supernatural character, the next thing to take over the void that The Undertaker left. And it started off really great. The vignettes of The Fiend, the stuff with the Firefly Funhouse, it was all really, really good. But then they just kept putting Bray Wyatt in just about every scenario where The Fiend doesn't make sense. Immediately, the biggest problem is putting him in world title matches. Why does this supernatural being care about materialistic things like world titles? It just doesn't make sense with the character that's being portrayed with The Fiend, so it just didn't jive. But then on top of that, you put him in just the most garbage matches. For example, the Hell in a Cell match against Seth Rollins, where it ended in a no contest because The Fiend got too beat up. Imagine that, a Hell in a Cell match ending that way. And of course, him losing the title to Goldberg in about 5 minutes in a Saudi Arabian show. The WWE basically self-sabotaged itself when it came to The Fiend Bray Wyatt. It's honestly so sad because The Fiend should have been the coolest thing to come out of the WWE in the 2010s. But that's just the WWE in 2019. That's what it was all about. It was just about bad, lazy storytelling. And unfortunately, The Fiend Bray Wyatt was one of the biggest casualties of that era of Vince McMahon's lazy booking. You might be shocked to see Braun Strowman here, but he's on here for a very similar reason that Alex Riley was on here earlier this video, because there was a much bigger window of time where they could have made Braun Strowman into the biggest star in the WWE, and they refused to pull the trigger on him, almost seemingly because his name wasn't Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns. Because in 2017 and in 2018, the Monster Among Men was so over. Just go back and watch the Fatal 4-Way SummerSlam match between Braun Strowman, Brock Lesnar, Samoa Joe, and Roman Reigns. Those are all 4 very big stars, and out of all of them, the one that was getting the biggest crowd reaction every single time they did anything, it was Braun Strowman. And it's not as if they were keeping away Braun Strowman from the main event scene. No, it was the opposite. Braun Strowman was for a while perpetually in the main event scene. It seemed like they were scared to finally pull the trigger on him and let him be at the top of the mountain. It wasn't until during the pandemic where they finally allowed him to win a world title, and even that was sort of because Roman Reigns couldn't be there. Remember, he won the Universal title from Goldberg because he had to step in for the void that Roman Reigns left because he couldn't participate in that because of his previous health history with leukemia during the pandemic. But by that point, the allure of main event Braun Strowman had already been lost because the WWE refused to capitalize in the moment that they had where they could have made him into that big megastar. But again, he unfortunately committed the ultra uber mega crime of not being named Roman Reigns in the 2010s. This one just like makes me cry. Dean Ambrose, now of course Jon Moxley, being one of the biggest stars outside of the WWE. I would say the biggest name outside of the WWE right now is Jon Moxley, and they had him, dude. They had him within their grasp for the better part of a decade, and they treated him so poorly to the point where he had no choice but to leave to protect the rest of his wrestling career because it was just getting shit on and shit on with terrible stories, terrible booking. Again, that late 2010s era of Vince McMahon starting to go senile, and unfortunately Dean Ambrose was left with having to get over a gimmick of wearing a gas mask because everyone in the arena was gross. It was just it's so upsetting to think about, considering what ended up becoming of Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins when Triple H started to take over in the pandemic and the stuff that happened with the bloodline. Like, think of what he could have been if he was involved in those storylines. He would have been awesome. And it's kind of crazy to have him on here considering he's a former WWE champion, but even when he was a WWE champion, he was never treated like the guy. There was always an aura of concern with the WWE when it came to Dean Ambrose, and I never fully understood why, considering he was really good in the ring and just incredibly charismatic and uber popular as well. It was honestly like borderline character assassination what they were doing with Dean Ambrose in the WWE. And look, he goes to AEW instantly. The biggest thing outside of the WWE. You could make an argument that even outside of the WWE, if you were to lump all the wrestlers on the planet, including WWE wrestlers, Jon Moxley is near the top of that list in terms of popularity, and he did that outside of the WWE. I have one of the best factions of all time, and that is the Undisputed Era. I don't understand how the WWE managed to screw all of this up. They had what was, at the time, in my opinion, the best faction since DX in their developmental, and because they weren't big, super strong, muscular guys, because they weren't a Roman Reigns, they couldn't find anything for any of these guys in the main roster. For God's sake, they were planning on making Adam Cole a manager. Adam Cole, baby, one of the best wrestlers on the planet, was going to be made someone's manager in the WWE. Think of like just the lack of vision that was leading the WWE in the early 2020s. It's asinine what Vince McMahon would do with people from NXT, which was literally nothing. Or if he did something, it was going to be something so bad that would completely ruin their character forever. But it's just crazy to think about that these four guys had one of the most popular, most over factions in WWE history, even if it was just in NXT, and none of them ever breathed the main roster. That's insane to think about. Samoa Joe is another one that they just did not know how to use. He was fantastic and was booked very well in NXT. But once again, in the main roster, it was just so much start-stop. It was almost like Vince McMahon was afraid to give the ball to a guy that he didn't create. That's what it felt like with Samoa Joe. Oh, how dare you make your name outside of the WWE? How dare you be a TNA guy, a Ring of Honor guy? How dare you not be a from the bottom up system WWE guy? That is the biggest crime you could have committed, Samoa Joe, because it seemed like that was the only thing wrong with Samoa Joe in the eyes of Vince McMahon. And as this video has demonstrated, it seems to be a repeated thing where these guys that were in the WWE that were not able to find success in the WWE because of the WWE itself, not because of their poor work, go on to find incredible success somewhere else. Think about Samoa Joe for a second, a guy that was a top guy everywhere that he went prior to the WWE, top guy in TNA. He comes to the WWE, the only place where he can't seem to be a top guy is the main roster. Was able to be a top guy in NXT. The second that he leaves the WWE, leaves the main roster, goes back down to NXT, top guy in NXT, goes to AEW, top guy in AEW. The only place similar to Christian that couldn't figure out how to make Samoa Joe work and how to not fumble Samoa Joe, the only place that could fumble Samoa Joe, because everyone else figured it out how to do it, was the WWE. Here's a different flavor for you. Mauro Ranallo. If you don't know who he is, he was the commentator from NXT who had a short stint on the main roster and was unequivocally beloved by wrestling fans as maybe the next best play-by-play guy since Michael Cole. And the WWE fumbled him because of a bad work environment where he was allegedly bullied more or less out of the company by executives and by JBL. Now, in today's WWE, it seems, again, from the outside looking in, like the work culture has gotten better. And it's a shame that Mauro Ranallo isn't in the WWE in today's landscape, because he would be so perfect either for NXT or for any of the brands. Because Mauro Ranallo is in mixed martial arts doing some amazing work. And again, another top tier talent, this time in the realm of commentators that the WWE had, that they just fumbled and let go to go somewhere else, to go find success somewhere else. And the last one, in maybe one of the more modern egregious ones, has to be Toni Storm. Toni Storm is in contention for being one of the biggest names in women's wrestling right now, with some of the best character in all of professional wrestling right now, with what she's doing as timeless Toni Storm in AEW. I think a lot of people would agree that her work there is world class. And once again, the WWE had her, barely used her when she was on the main roster, to the point where Toni Storm felt like she was being disrespected and that there was no longevity or long-term plans for her, that she asked for her release. And clearly she was right, because the WWE instantly granted her release and let her go. Now immediately goes to AEW, becomes a top player there, becomes one of the best character workers in all of professional wrestling today. And she was in the WWE umbrella. WWE fumbled her and let Tony Khan grab that ball and run with it for a touchdown. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this. There are countless examples of this. These are not all of them. There are dozens and dozens. So now I want you to come up with your example or examples. Let me know down in the comments below. That's it. I'm done. Get out of here.